Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com. Let's say you only had 1,000 prospects in your market. How would you cold email them so you get the maximum number of deals out of it? Today's cast covers how Jeremy successfully approached his first market using cold email, how to identify the VIP prospects in your list and then build relationships with them from scratch, and finally, why you should start slow and how to ramp up after your first deals have been closed. Enjoy. Okay, so Jeremy, question of the day. If you had only 1,000 prospects, what would you do? How would you approach your campaign in a limited market?
Funny thing is, I do pretty much what I've done when I started. I had 1,400 person in my market, so it's close enough.
Really? Okay, so this is a true life story on what would you do? Okay, even better.
I was targeting financial planners in Australia at that time. And funny enough, I did a lot of things right on the first attempt, which is
That rarely happens, right?
that rarely, very rarely happens. Okay, so before I go ahead and tell you what I did, how about you start by telling me how you would approach that problem?
Sure. So, first of all, if I could only reach out to 1,000 prospects, I need to be prepared. I just can't afford to reach out with sloppy value props and weak CTAs if there's only 1,000 prospects out there. So, I'm going to do extra research and I'm going to hopefully bring information that I've acquired or things I've learned by selling through other channels. So maybe I've tried online ads or in person. It doesn't matter, but hopefully I've got customers already. My pitch has been crafted and perfected. So at least I know how I can start writing emails effectively that are going to get these prospects' attention and what they really care about.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for me, even before that, I'll do a pre-campaign step.
Okay, what's this?
That means for me, I would actually build a network. If you look at this, pretty much all market had that 80-20% rule baked in. So, you won't find people on top of their game for the entire market. So out of the 1,000 people, only 200 will actually be really good at what they do. That's basically, the 80-20% rule. My first thing will be to figure out who are the leaders, like the 200s of that 1,000. And then what I'll do next is I'll reach out to them and try to just connect with them and try to get to know them a bit more. I'll follow them on Twitter, I ask for invitation on LinkedIn, and just basically start building the network before I even start emailing them, cold email pitch.
What would you maybe be looking for on the internet when you want to start determining who are the superstars and everybody else?
You got a lot of ways. You could look, for example, at conferences in their market and then look at the top speakers. Simple as that. They may not be good, but at least they have some aura, some charisma that resonate with their peers.
Yep.
In my case, it was very obvious from their LinkedIn profile because LinkedIn is usually how do you want to be seen professionally. So it's very simple to figure out who had a good website, who was basically looking good, right, on their profile. So it was pretty easy for me to figure that one out. The other thing that you realize as well in the market is usually it's not always like individuals. Sometimes you have chains or franchise. So you may also want to put them in a separate group. Does that actually make sense to reach out to all the franchise, or do you should actually, contact the headquarter kind of thing? So that's also another way of splitting. And once you got that, what I'll do next is I'll figure out how can I add easily some value without, sending my stuff. Before I go ahead and then ask them to give me their time, maybe I can go ahead with an offer. Maybe the offer is simply helping them to network together. So it's like, hey, I created a Facebook group specifically targeted for financial planner in Australia. Here are a few, people who comes in. Are you also interested in coming and contributing? It's a special group, whatever kind of the offering. So I wouldn't actually maybe pitch my stuff straight away, but I always pitch things to either give them value or figure out what they want.
So the first time you reach out, it may simply just to build rapport, establish some sort of a connection so that you're no longer this random guy who sent them an email. Instead, oh, you're Jeremy, the person who referred you to XYZ or whatever.
Yeah. So it could be like you create a Facebook group and you could send to them like saying, hey, I created a kick-ass financial planner group in Australia. Would you be actually interested in participating as well on invite only? If you don't, then that's fine. No big deal. And know that we have this person or this person. And I probably even use a little bit of money to do some paid ads so that people looking at this actually will go and join the group.
Oh, that's nice.
I would target specifically maybe in Facebook ad. I will target financial planners in Australia, whatever, and then send them over to this group.
Genius. So essentially, you're having your prospects opt into your Facebook group. So you're sort of this instant trusted figure within the space as opposed to most cold emailers that approach them.
Absolutely.
Smart.
Then the next thing I will probably do is then I will reach out to understand them better. And that would be a bit hard at the beginning, but if you do it well, then you could already have a few ones going. And then after that, it becomes like super easy because in a market when you have millions of people, saying I talk to 60 of your peers doesn't mean anything. In a market when you only have like 1,000, and remember, only 200 are probably good and maybe even less are not solo businesses, then if you say I talked to already 60 of your peers, that really means like, okay, I want to talk to this guy. Why so many people are talking to him, So I will use a hell of a lot the social proof on the next email.
Brilliant. You're really just getting the snowball rolling here. You're not trying too hard at first of closing any sales. You're just setting things up so that in the next phase, the connections have already been made so that the meetings can be scheduled, sales can be acquired. Okay, I like it.
That's right. We are trying to build the momentum, really.
You've identified the star players. You've figured out a way to get some rapport going, maybe by inviting them to a Facebook group. And now what?
If you're thinking from an outsider standpoint, 1,000 people, if you contact 20 people a day, that still give you like 50 days. So you roughly got a span of 2 months for your cold email.
Okay.
And if you do this sort of approach that I recommend, which is learning instead of selling as the first step, you got those 2 months span where you're going to accumulate a lot of understanding. And the next 2 months can be done with simply keeping on adding value, which is sending them maybe, asking them if they would be interested in your report. You've been doing lots of interviews and comparing different firms and stuff. So a lot of people will be really interested in what's your findings.
Cool.
Right?
Yep.
And of course, I'm saying that if you had a lot of time, just a limited amount of people, but a lot of time, right? Which is not always the case. But if you're building a business on the side, this is super relevant.
Or I would say if you're brand new to cold email, it doesn't matter how established your business is, you've still only got one shot at this. So I'm not so sure you want to haul ass through this campaign.
Yeah, that's very true. Absolutely.
Okay, so at this point, we're sharing some content that may get conversation started. And any other particulars with this limited market here once are at this stage where we can share reports with them? Is this when you transition to, let's say, sales meetings?
Well, when your PDF or whatever you want to share with them, there will be obviously a link to your product. So it could be, you don't have to just mention your own product. It could be very well like saying like, it seems that, the top document sharing is Google Docs by 30%, and then you got Dropbox by X%, and so on. But for solving this particular problem, you could try this tool, and that's your tool kind of thing, right? So it could be mixed and stuff, but it could also be sent with a demo of your product or just that's the right time where you can ask things back. You could say, hey, would that be too much to ask to get some feedback on the product that we're building for your industry? At that point, I think you're well established, you gave some value, you have some credibility, some authority. It's an easy yes, right? It's like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. I'm not going to lose my time. Sure, show me what you have.
And at this point, they owe you one. You've been so generous up until this point, they sort of feel the need to, return the favor, so to speak.
Reciprocity, baby.
Very cool. So yeah, so now I can almost already see like if you're getting feedback on a product, I imagine that right there on the call, even though you've positioned it as, hey, I just want your feedback. What do you think? If you've built something of value that they maybe haven't seen before, it can plainly see how they would be crazy to turn it down. They're going to ask you, okay, so how do I pay for something like this? Right?
Yeah, at the end, if during the call and you're showing them stuff, they're not asking you how much does it cost, it's kind of like obvious that you built something of no interest.
Even if they say, wow, this is neat. This is great.
Yeah.
I really
Oh, that
like
looks
it.
good. Okay, well,
Gotta
talk
go.
to you later.
Yeah. Be in touch. Don't call me. I'll call you.
Yeah, be in touch. Let me know how this goes.
There you go. Right. Then you have to say crap and go back to the drawing board and figure out what went wrong.
Exactly. Just a small tip, by the way, if people are asking you as you're showing the demo, how much does it cost? You say, hey, Jack, this is actually the best part. Like, let me keep it for the end.
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
And the last thing you probably would want to do, and, it's optional, and it doesn't have to be done at the end. It could be done during that process, is looking for influencers. So in my case of financial planners, they don't really have an influencer per se, but they are going to conferences, for example, and conferences touches hundreds of them. So it could well be, reaching out to conferences and saying like, hey, build up this report, whatever may be interesting. Maybe you want to share it to your own attendant, or, is there a possibility to do some advertisement, whatever kind of thing, because at that stage that your thing is working, it's closing some deals. That may be a good way to leverage that and really reinforce your presence on the market.
So by that stage, you will have made sure that whatever you're pitching, it's working, right? And so then you just sort of level it up with paid ads or, like you said, connecting with some VIPs that can multiply your efforts.
That's right.
I dig it. Anything else in this sort of string of steps for reaching out to a limited market?
No, I think you reached the end of my juice on this one.
Okay. Well, cool. So I've got just a few points I can add. I see them as sort of support for the steps that you've taken us through this far, right? So I'm not going to try and steer listeners from doing exactly what you just said. I think there's solid gold in that.
Go on, Jack. Don't be shy.
But okay, so keep these in mind. All right. So I mentioned come prepared just because you can't afford to be sloppy with 1,000 prospects. So the next one, I would start with the low-hanging fruit. So if I had 1,000 prospects, there's probably some that I already have an existing relationship in some form. Or maybe I can get an intro to 3% of other people using the connections I have in the market. And I would start there and use that to secure meetings with these, let's say, low-hanging prospects, because I very much agree with you, Jeremy. In the beginning, you want to get some momentum built up, and finding people you already kind of know or have people who can connect you is maybe the easiest way you can get meetings set up. During these meetings, you're going to ask, plenty of questions to get to the heart of the pain points in case you're not 100% clear on them yet. And hopefully you're closing a few people in these initial meetings. And if that happens, you can ask people for referrals who may also benefit. Some customer may have 5 other financial planning buddies that they would, imagine would want to speak to you about this, especially if they were excited.
Dig it.
A couple more. So first, given a limited market, you're going to want to start cold emailing slowly, especially if this is your first go round with cold email. Why? Because unlike your first attempt, Jeremy, most people aren't going to get it right the first shot. I know I certainly didn't. So I would recommend just starting off slow and also starting out with the least valuable prospects first, just because you're going to be getting some feedback, or if anything, you'll be getting some data on open rates or on whether or not these emails are doing their job. And hopefully with some feedback, you can keep perfecting your emails so that by the time you get to your most valuable prospects, your pitch is tightened up and you should have like the best chance of getting them to reply.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm actually battling with the two ideas about either you go for the pros or you go for non-pros.
Well, here's the thing. I say definitely go for both, but in what order? I just like getting some feedback, putting your cold emails into open air and seeing how your prospect sort of acts on them. It just gives me more confidence before I set out to tackle maybe the biggest prospects in the field. I want to make sure that the emails are great.
That's correct. At the same time, I think there is probably a missed opportunity unless you're like salesy as hell.
Right.
And in this case, that won't work, and then you will burn the lead. I think there is more chances in you starting with actually the top stars than actually starting with the lower one. And the reason for it is because your first email should be super humble,
Right.
saying like, I'm just trying to learn. And then when you come back to them, you say, hey, I've done my research. I talked to a lot of people. Now I want to talk to you.
Including this person and this person.
Exactly. And then they will say, oh, gee, this person is serious. You know, he contacted me 3 months ago and now he's recontacting me with some serious things. And I think that goes a long way. So, and the other thing is that if you manage to secure speaking with one of those stars, this will be worth like 20 of the other ones, if not more.
Right. Right.
So I would say you will learn like so much by going after the superstars and actually, going with the other ones.
So here's a let's call it the giant difference between our two approaches. So we sort of took notes on how we would approach a market with 1,000 prospects separately, and then we hit record and started talking about it here. But something that I wasn't keeping in mind was this attitude of just being very humble and just doing nothing but learning early on. And I think that's an awesome approach. And given this mindset, that changes things. I would be comfortable with reaching out to almost anyone because there's nothing to get burned on. You're just getting feedback genuinely. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. If you were selling, I agree. You will have to change.
But if you're listening here and you're saying like, oh, that's a clever trick, like hit them up saying that you're just trying to learn. And then when you got them on the phone, you pivot to that's not what we're talking about, right? It's a clear difference. And the main thing you need to know.
The goal is to build a relationship, not to burn it.
There you go. And just keep in mind, if the topic is intriguing, if you've got an interesting solution to a problem that they really have, the prospect is going to, let's say, turn the conversation towards, okay, so how much does it cost, right? They'll do the turning for you. And if they're not, it's probably because you haven't learned enough. You're not quite there product-wise. Okay, so great points, by the way. I'll keep going. I've got a couple more points. I would say with a market with just 1,000 prospects, you can afford to use multiple channels, or maybe I should say you can't afford not to use multiple channels. Jeremy said you may have a warm-up campaign where you just drop them a Facebook invite if they want to join your group. This kind of thing's great. That's kind of what I'm talking about here is maybe like LinkedIn messaging, Facebook ads, tweet at them on Twitter, or pick up the phone and give them a call. Remember, there's only 1,000 prospects, and if they're valuable enough, you should probably be giving them your all since it's such a small market here. And I've got one last note before we close things up here, and that's check your deliverability obsessively. You can't afford to go, let's say, 150 prospects, and it turns out that your emails have been bouncing or getting sent to spam or just, not opened. I mean, on this small of a market, you probably want to have open tracking turned on for most of your touches, and just make sure you're on top of it because you just need to be in front of them. You have a limited number of opportunities, and deliverability is going to ensure that, technically speaking, you're doing the best job of pitching and getting these replies generated.
And of course, be super personalized in your emails because you can afford it and you cannot not afford it.
Yeah, exactly. And I hear us talking about a couple things that should improve the chances of getting 1,000 people to reply. But the truth is, they apply to markets with 10,000 people, with 50,000 people.
That's right.
These are best practices, and it's just more apparent that you should be taking careful steps towards getting replies given a limited number here. But hey, if you're fortunate enough to have 50,000 people that it could be a great fit, great customer, by all means, start off with it, especially in the beginning. Get yourself a lot of good replies, good customers early on.
There you go. You heard it.
Okay, cool. So now you know what to do if you only have 1,000 prospects in your space. Jeremy, great cast. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jack. All right, there you go. Too small of a market will never be a valid excuse for not starting a business since listening to this podcast. In short, aim for a relationship first. Connect with as many people as you can from this market using Facebook, existing contacts, or even ads before you send traditional cold email. I'm still plagued by LinkedIn connection from financial planners to this day, actually. Then, give your prospect as much value as you can while establishing authority in your industry. That will earn you the right to pitch them later. And remember that most of the time in small market, getting your foot in the door is the hard part. So make sure the door stays open by working your list over and over instead of burning through prospect one at a time.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast
So they can send awesome emails.
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.